What's up, everybody? My name's Mike Sjogren, here with my co-host,
Emanuele, Pani.
We're part of a group of specialized real estate investors you've probably never heard of.
We didn't start with deep pockets or wealthy families, and we don't rely on 401ks, mutual funds, or traditional real estate investing.
In fact, many of us don't even own the properties that fund our freedom. If you ask the money experts out there, they'd say what we do is impossible, yet it's happening every single day.
It's happening through a new niche called short-term rentals.
We are Short-Term Rental Nation, and these are our secrets. What's going on, STR Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Short-Term Rental Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sjogren, here as always with my main man and brother from another mother, Mr. Emanuele Pani. What's up, E?
My brother, it's so good to see you. I get to come to Boston on Monday. I'm super excited for our boardroom event. And I'm also excited that it's kind of no longer winter up there. So from the last time I was there, it's going to be...
It's golf season, baby.
Better. It's nice. Golf season.
It's not South Florida weather, but it's warm for here. So
yeah, that's good, man. But life has been good. I had one of my best friends from Italy come to visit me for this past week. It was great time for the soul to just like hang out and just like chit chat and talk. And you know what's funny? Like I realized how different my lifestyle and my mindset has become over time, especially when I hang out with people from home. He looks at my life and he's like, your life is so regimented. He's like, you're so scheduled and so systematic. And I'm like, bro, I got shit to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like I got stuff to do. And I'm like, you have no idea how dialed back my schedule has been because you're here. And like how many things I am not doing. So it was interesting because it's kind of like that, going back to a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, giving myself grace of the fact that like he's here. It's important. It's holiday for him. He's a good friend. I know it will feel good. And then me being like, oh, I have so much stuff that I want to do right now that I'm not doing. And I have like all my workouts. Like I couldn't work out twice a day like I normally do. And most people will be like, yeah, and I'm like, yeah, but that's a problem for me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a problem. And it goes back to like, once you create your standards, they're your standards, bro. And it's just like, I am in a position now that I no longer want to put myself in situations where I know they don't meet my standards. And he's like, how do you know that they're not going to meet your standard? I'm like, because I've done it enough times that I can play it out forward. I'm like, if we do that, I'm going to be there and be like, I wish I was home reading my books or like watching stuff or like what, like doing nothing. And so it's just like a reminder of like being a little bit more flexible with life, you know, not so rigid. And at the same time, not apologizing for the fact that like we got shit to do. And like we're creating a life that is different than most people. And so it's going to look different than most people. There's now like, you know,
if you want to be the 1%, you can't act like the 99. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but like if you want to get to the next level, you got to start doing different things and being disciplined and regimented. And you look at any really high level successful person, they're very disciplined and they all have routines and they all have these rituals. And we need that, right? Otherwise you just kind of bounce around and float around and, you know, there's no right or wrong way to do life. But if you want to get to a very high level at something, you have to be structured and disciplined. So,
and also because it helps you set, and I think this is what I realized hanging out with other people, it's how purposeful we are with our attitude going into each day, because our stuff is so regimented that like we're not like, I don't wake up and I'm like, I feel what today? I'm like, no, hell no. I wake up, I'm like, I feel this. Yeah. But because it's so regimented that like, again, like there is the ebbs and flows of life, but like I know how I want to be. But that only happens if you are regimented and kind of purposeful and you're not reactive to what the day brings, right? So it was great, but I'm happy that he's gone now and I get to be
back to your workout today.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited. But talking about things I'm excited about, we had our good friend Brad on the show. He's a mortgage numbers guy. So guys, please, unfortunately, mortgage numbers people are mortgage and numbers people, but we need them. And he did have some great info on just overall, I think the most important thing for me was just like, how do you go talk to a bank? Like, how do you go talk to a bank and present yourself to a bank in a way that is kind of putting the chips on your side, like kind of stacking the odds in your favor. And I think as lending, it's more competitive and the rates are higher. It's something that everybody needs to learn how to do better. Because if you
Yeah.
can get better at qualifying and getting financing for properties, that is one of the things that you have to master as a real estate investor. Like there's really
Yeah. So I mean,
no way
him and
around it.
his wife are a power couple, right? So he's a mortgage broker. She's got a real estate brokerage. They're in operating in multiple states. They've got a portfolio of over 80 doors now across multiple asset classes, which is what I drilled him on in this episode of like, what's the overall philosophy in your strategy as far as diversification and what you're looking for and when to pivot and readjust? I always find that fascinating. I love people picking people's brains, especially that are, all right, I've got an office building and I've got a multifamily and I've
Hmm.
got a bunch of SCRs and we've got some midterm rentals. It's like, okay, cool. What is the strategy behind that? Especially from
Hmm.
somebody like Brad, who's very analytical and strategic. There's a method to the madness. So we drilled in
Hmm.
on that. And then, like you said, we really drilled in on, you know, especially as newer folks, you don't realize that you have a lot of negotiating power when you go to the banks. Not everything is set in stone. So, how do you present yourself to the bank? How can you structure deals that are going to be more favorable? What are things that you should look out for? So, there's a lot of good nuggets in this episode. So, let's jump right in and start our combo with Brad Flanagan.
What's going on, STR Nation? Today we have our good friend Brad Flanagan on the show. What's going on, Brad?
Good to see you, sir. Long time.
Likewise, man. Likewise. So tell us a little bit about you, man. Like tell us a little bit about how come you've been in doing real estate now since 2005, and then what's your story? What's your life about?
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I would just, when I generalize it, man, I'm a student of finance, of real estate and finance. So just out there trying to learn and stay humble and keep growing. They say what is progress equals happiness. So started in the business back in '05 as an Army veteran, not knowing anything about this world. And happened to get an opportunity because I had worked in title even during high school to go into the mortgage business.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say my professional experience as a lender had actually turned me into a professional borrower and always always wanted to have the title of real estate investor, so leveraged that knowledge and became a real estate investor at kind of that house hacking method they talk about where you buy your primary and retain it and buy the next one and turn it into a rental. And gosh, scaled, I think we're running about 84 units right now between commercial, office, multifamily, and single family properties between 3 states, Nebraska, Colorado, and Arizona.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. All while being married, having kids.
yeah, I met my wife in Vegas, and gosh, she's a powerhouse. She has transformed me, made me more of a true entrepreneur. She was a student in business entrepreneurship, and she's owned small businesses, exited, and then went full on real estate as of like 2012. And so she sources, she markets. Marketing is truly her strong suit, and more of because she's passionate about it. So when you had some questions, man, and that whole the setting expectations and communication with the marketing and with the potential guests, that was straight from her. And I think that's what has made us successful in the short-term rental space because you can have the experiences and then you can have a place to lay my head down at the end of the day, depending on the market that you're in. And so that's kind of our strategy is find the needs and try to fulfill them the best we can.
What's the portfolio look like now? Because you've got a mix of stuff, right? So you said you do some commercial, some single family. Give me a breakdown of like what that looks like now.
Yeah. So the financial ex-financial advisor in me was all about diversification. And I figured, if we have to do that in the securities market, why can't we do that in the real estate market too? And so we do short, mid, and long-term rentals, commercial office space. And so I have one multifamily property that's strictly midterm, so nicely furnished rentals. We vacated the whole thing, renovated it. We get like double the gross rents for that market because it's furnished, because of the quality of finishes. And so those generally range from 30 to 120-day stays. And then short term, we've curbed a little bit in like the Omaha market. Outside of that, we do the vacation type short term in the mountains, usually somebody looking for a little bit more of a luxury feel in Colorado, and then a very nice pool type setting out in Arizona. So we scaled down in Arizona just with the volatility of the market, and I'm somewhat of an analyst at heart, so I knew, hey, Arizona is a market that, slab on grade, 12-month construction cycles. I wanted to be prepared, if anything, conservative as far as how volatile that market was going to be. So we got out of some condos and single families out there and scaled it down to one in Arizona. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love how because you guys are very similar, right? And like just like how the beauty of this country is that it's so large, it has so many micro markets, and in understanding all the different markets and how certain markets are more sustainable to the midterm, the long terms, the short terms, and understanding like how to kind of like leverage and shuffle that around. Because we've talked about this in the past, how like really like it gets to the point as you grow in your wealth, there really becomes a game of not just growing it, but it's also like really being smart on like how to spread it, protect it, diversify it in a way that like it remains sustainable. Because the Hail Marys that you would have done fresh out of the army in Vegas, you wouldn't do now, right? So there's a whole different kind of set of ball game. Like the rules are completely different now, right? Like in this terms of like how exposed you are. So what are the rules between you and Jamie, and like who do you have certain avenues where you're the ultimate decision maker and she's the ultimate decision maker, right? Like you know what I'm trying to ask? Because again, like I think
absolutely.
on some mathematical stuff, there's some hard realities of like this. Look, Jamie, like Bebs, these are the numbers. We can't do anything else, right? And then there's stuff on her side that she's like, look, I am right. You're not seeing it. So how does that kind of work? Because I think it's super important for people that work and have a partnership with their spouse, and you
Right.
have different avenues of like, this is my domain, this is yours. How are the choices made?
Yeah, that's been a journey, to say the least, in really identifying who's got what strengths and weaknesses. And then when you get to achiever type mindset, as I would describe it, then you tend to start to fall into that competition as well. So there's been times where maybe she might want some of the finance stuff, and I might want some of the structural, marketing and the acquisition stuff. And so we've learned to really trust each other, and to the point of, if you feel like you're being called, or if you feel like you're being guided, or there's just a passion for a particular project, even if the numbers may not make sense, I'm still going to be there to support her, and vice versa. If she knows that I'm trying to look at it from a global perspective, and I see that that creates a weakness in the true integrity of the whole thing, then she's going to take heed to my warning and say, hey, we will pass on this one, or maybe this is a great opportunity to strengthen a relationship with somebody we know that's looking to strategically grow, and we're going to show them what we see in it and explain why we have to pass on it, and see if they can make a good decision. So generally, if it is banking or finance related, it's 100% in my lane. We do consult with obviously outside professionals like our CPA, our attorney, to see, hey, what shouldn't we do? And then it's a lot about that resilience and that flexibility. So One being that she's in real estate, we've always maintained a significant inventory of staging equipment. So that makes it easy to either lease it to the short-term rental side where it's or sell those assets to that, or vice versa. If we're going to destage a property and turn it into a long-term rental, we have already an intended use for it. So it's not like it's a loss. And it's finding those small degrees of adjustment that you can make that completely alter the destination, maybe a little bit further down the road. I use that analogy about like a pilot, that at 1 degree can put them in a completely different portion of the world. So hopefully that answers your question. And then as far as when we're trying to consult or coach or guide somebody else who's seeking some advice, it's just about helping them find what their competitive advantage is. I preach all the time. You don't want me to be doing any kind of contracting, flooring, general contracting of any nature, because I'm going to waste money and I'm going to take more time, which ultimately leads to a loss financially as well.
I'm curious from your perspective, since you're so diversified, how do you look at your portfolio? Are you looking to get an overall aggregated return? Like, walk me through like the analysis that's going on in your head as you're evaluating your portfolio and deciding when to make adjustments, or, hey, maybe we should do more short-term rentals here. Maybe we should get into another office space here. Like, walk me through that thought process.
So initially, it's each individual transaction that I'll look at and try to determine based on a kind of a set of guidelines that I think we've put in place for ourselves, as far as like cash on cash returns, what kind of potential growth opportunity we have if we're getting something under market value and it doesn't cash flow. Will it give us the ability to lever up a little bit more significantly on a subsequent transaction? I feel like I'm a debt manager. I'm not like an investment guy. I'm literally somebody who studies debt and then tries to ensure that I have the ability to restructure at all times. And it's why the secondary market is often a more challenging place for the seasoned investor. It's usually the catalyst for the entry level investor, because of the cost of manufacturing every time. That can really erode your equity position if you're making frequent changes. So, and I learned that the hard way.
Can you give us an example of that? Because
Yeah.
those are a lot of big words in there. I want to break that down.
Thank you. I do tend to do that. So that's why it's awesome to have my wife as part of this. Unfortunately, she had an obligation. So I, one point in time, was really attracted to the low interest rate environment, and we were in a place where the cash flows were good, and we weren't really dependent on the cash flow portion of the investment portfolio. And so I took 5 properties at one time, refinanced them with the same lender into 15-year fixed rate loans. So that's 5 separate appraisals and underwriting fees and processing fees, credit reports, so on and so forth. And just to secure that 2.25 or whatever percent interest rate. And those loans didn't last but 6 months, because subsequent to that, we did a bigger acquisition that required I take everything and place it with one bank at that point in time. And so we refinanced that. And so the brain damage of going through that traditional loan refinance was significant, the documentation standards. And then that added cost upfront to get those loans in place was not recovered, because the recapture period would have taken longer to stay in those loans, let them season before I would have saw those benefits.
So factoring in that cost of the whole banking transaction, right? The closing costs, the origination fees, like all of that. You refied everything, refied 5 properties into one, then you had to do it all over again. So just thinking about some of those costs as you're restructuring your portfolio.
Exactly. Because, yeah, you're reestablishing escrow accounts, generally speaking, on a secondary market loan. Because if you waive them, you're paying another 25 basis points or 1/4% to waive escrow fees, and that can add up. And so, again, all the little degrees try to find a way to minimize my costs or improve my returns, will then put us in that better position long term. And every time you're doing in a refinance, you're typically covering that cost through the loan balance. So as that loan balance continues to creep up, it eliminates opportunities or causes you to have to be in that loan, make a lot more payments, and let the property appreciate to just get that initial investment back.
I got one more question, then I'll let you jump in because I know he's itching to ask a question. I'm asking this selfishly for me because my philosophy has always been to like master one niche and go all in and then diversify by market or asset type, like within that niche. For you, you've gone wide across a lot of different asset classes. How are you finding these deals? And like, are you talking to brokers and you're like, hey, just send me everything? Or how are you staying focused and how are you generating leads for this variety of different properties in different markets?
Yeah. So there's that's the competitive advantage again. I'm licensed in a lot of states, so I end up generating relationships with real estate professionals or investors. And that's where I would say the majority of our opportunities were brought to us because the audience has grown and their awareness has grown and says, hey, I know you're looking for this. This particular transaction has this need. Would you be interested in looking at it? And as much as I like to always say no or have no be my default, it's hard not to at least look at something. And if it meets usually all three metrics, right? Will this work as a short term? Will this work as a long term? And would this work as a flip? The the downside is very low at that point. And so it's more about learning every time you do something new as well. And the more I learn, the better resource I can be for literally everybody who wants to play in the space. And so that's part of my motivation is when I sit down with a client, which is a little more rare, I have a great team that I can lean on from the loan space. But when I do have the ability to talk with somebody, I say, I'm a buyer and a seller on a regular basis. So chances of me having personally ran into this situation are high, and I'm going to be able to give you better guidance because no transaction is a slam dunk anymore. And so the fact that my wife then became licensed in multiple states, even if it was just for personal use, she then has access to the MLS, and that is again another acquired skill is combing through listings. And one of the biggest benefits to us is that people like to narrow their search. They limit how many properties show up when that agent's sending you those automated emails, or when you're looking through one of the aggregators on the websites, you already have pool or waterfront or view checked. And if the agents who entered that into the MLS, or even better, the employees that are just paid to get that listing in there quickly, miss certain aspects of the characteristics of the property, we look at it from a more broader sense and find those little diamonds in a rough. The estate sale that went for the cheapest agent that they could get and then failed to put good descriptions or note that it had a pool got overlooked, and then we were able to come in competitively because it had more market time and the motivation of the seller increased. And so those are truly the little niches that we found ourselves in to find properties at a good deal. So if I was at a niche, I would say I'm finding properties at 68 to 73% loan to retail value, or price to retail value.
Interesting. Okay.
Which then makes it easier to cash flow because I'm getting it at a lower cost, and I might be able to market it or rent it out or resell it at a higher value.
I also like that they work as a flip, as a short-term rental, as a long-term rental, because that kind of covers a lot of bases. And on the flip side, obviously, you're looking at that value add, kind of like renovation BRRRR method, right, in a sense, and then you're doing the short or the long term. My question to you was gonna be, and I know you don't have an 8 ball, so like you don't know what the future is like, right? But like, what are you seeing for lending? What are some advice or tips that you have for people now in terms of like how to actually buy and finance something? And if somebody wants to buy a vacation rental now, what are some of the loan programs that you're seeing coming down the pipeline, or what would be a way that you would advise somebody like, hey, this would be a great way for you to get into a vacation rental in the next 6 to 12 months?
So from the economic standpoint, anymore, all I know is rates change.
Yeah.
The statistical data has been so difficult. The inflation has caused the cost of things to go up, so then the numbers don't look right. I'm sure that the volume that's being transacted is less, but because the costs have increased so much, the sales numbers just still seem high. And so we continue to operate with our eyes in the rear view, so we'll stay in environments longer than we should, and then that causes the pendulum to swing, I think, a little bit greater than we would like it to. I love consistency. I don't like chasing volatility. So I'm watching the employment numbers more than anything to give us the early indicator of where the market's going. Then I believe that because things like building permits, currently they're down about 13% or between 12 and 13%. That's continuing to support the fact that we'll still have low inventory. So it gives me confidence in our values, especially in markets, again, that don't have the most resilient construction schedules or the abundance of land to be built. So the metropolitan areas, I still think, are strong for demand. I'm still seeing lines down the driveway during open houses. So tells me that the market's there. It just requires that people have more marketability when they're a seller. And if I'm a buyer, I have eyes for that project that may just need some minor cosmetic type improvements. And it stands to give you a significant opportunity because people are more picky due to the interest rate environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get hung up on interest rate. I get hung up on amortization or the term a little bit more. If I can find something, which is great about buying a second home, is that it's easier to get a 30-year note. A lot of the stuff in the commercial world ends up being 20 to 25 if you're lucky, which then helps keep your costs down and it gives you that little margin for some cash flow. But I would definitely not put myself on pause because of interest rates. I swear I started doing this and rates were coming down to the numbers that we're looking at today. I would find the right partners or the right network of people to help me increase my options. Banks are vast in the offerings that they have. Some will have a portfolio or an in-house product that they can jump on. Ask questions, do your numbers, and it's a it's literally like a sale. Watch Shark Tank and see how people pitch themselves. That's what you need to do when you get in front of a banker. And not all bankers are created equal. So I touch on the questions that
Yeah, I think so.
comprehensive.
So kind of to re-sum it up for people, I think don't let necessarily the rate kind of stop you to focus more on the amortization of the rate, because obviously like that, if you get into a product that is amortized longer, your payment is going to be cheaper, so it's going to make more sense for you. And then on the buyer and seller situation, what I understood you said is that on the seller side, people need to be more flexible and realistic in terms of like their expectations of money out, and on the buyer side, be aware of the fact that buyers are being picky, and so things that need some love are probably going to sit for longer, giving you a better opportunity to get into something if you're willing to give it some love. I think that's how I
Exactly.
would have summed it up.
Yeah. And if you're in that building phase, cash on cash is typically going to be a better approach to look at something. So instead of trying to have that bigger down payment, the less you can put out for a greater return is going to help you grow in the long run. In like traditional lending, you have to have 20 or so percent down on a non-owner occupied property, but the benefit is you get to use income from that property to qualify for the loan. On a second home, you can go as low as 10% and you're allowed to generate revenue or rent that property out so long as you occupy it for some portion of the year. But that could be the difference between your ability to, justify having a little bit of a lifestyle increase, but then significantly increase your multiple streams of income because you bought in the right location, maybe taxes are lower. So I'd look at like those overhead costs.
So what are some of the things that are negotiable with the bank? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that you can negotiate with the bank And in my experience, you have better luck working with some of the smaller local banks that know the property, that know the market. Maybe they're a portfolio lender, meaning they keep the loans in house. They don't sell them to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What is negotiable in that process?
Especially when it comes to like state chartered and your smaller community banks, they, for the most part, just have a bank policy that they have to stick within. And if they make an exception, which they're allowed to make exceptions essentially to all bank policy with justification, that's where almost everything is, I would like to say, negotiable. Whether that's if it's portfolio or like an in-house product, it may not be fixed for the full term. But when you look at the outlook, we're likely not to need a fixed rate for more than the next 3 years or so. And so the term can be negotiable. The amount of money out of pocket can be negotiable, even if it's, hey, you got to put 20% down now, but we'll fund you another 10% after the loan closes as a line of credit or as just a fixed loan to make those improvements that you need to make. Can you move your assets over into the bank? And so that we have revenue coming in and out of your checking and savings account. Those are all little ways that you can help improve the negotiability or your negotiation position with that bank. And the lower the loan size, sometimes you'll find an officer who has signature authority. And so you really just need to get the confidence of one person to support you in that effort. Uh, that's one of the characteristics of most successful investors is the resilience that I don't give up just because I talked to one person and they blew me off and made me feel like I was insignificant. And so I just ask the other investors, hey, who are you working with? Who can I talk to? And every presentation is an ability to get better and refine that presentation. But the key is knowing your own numbers, analyzing yourself, trying to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are so that you can bring those up in the conversation with the banker and say, I know this is the weakness in this particular situation, but here are the strengths that offset that risk.
What do you suggest that people bring to the bank? Like, is there certain things in a quote unquote pitch deck or presentation that people should bring to the bank to highlight why the bank should loan them money? Are there certain things that you think people aren't doing that they should be doing?
So it'll be all that standard checklist stuff, but the one most important document that they'll probably consider is your personal financial statement. And so that's just a balance sheet for your own personal life. Assets minus liabilities is the net worth. And so being comprehensive to the point where everything is itemized, and that way you can always give a pitch to, hey, this is the ideal scenario that I've analyzed. And then the other document's a pro forma. And so if you master those two, your supporting documents are just those tax returns, bank statements, so on and so forth. But those summary documents show the banker what you've been able to generate or create and how your mind works to see what your plan is for the future. And then they will take that, internalize it, and come up with a potential counter for your strategy to help you achieve your goals while still meeting their risk tolerance.
So would you put together like a slide deck of images of the property or any plans that you have for it, like a business plan, and then have, your pro forma, or for anybody that's not familiar, that's just your projections for what the property is going to do. And then your, maybe your personal bio and background on any experience you have relative to it. And then your personal financials and your net worth statement.
So yeah, the resume is absolutely key. Just like if you were going to do a letter of intent, you're going to show the seller, hey, this guy has the ability to follow through and perform based on past performance. And so, yes, I've gone so far as to say, here's pictures of what I already have, so that you, Mr. Banker, can see the level of quality of my finishes. And this is why I get the rents that I get, even though you might not see the atypical investor be able to generate this kind of revenue. Here's proven concept. And I don't want you to generalize me like everybody else. I want you to see that, hey, I'm writing you this. I generally have my initial conversation. I follow up with an email that shows exactly, summarizes what we talked about, and then gets into the weeds and the details with as many attachments as are required. I wouldn't send them a PowerPoint, but I'll send them a PDF with any and all the documentation, or even an Excel spreadsheet, to the point where they can more easily extract the data that I'm giving them. Hey, here's a PDF, so you don't so if you start messing around with my Excel sheet, you know, you can re-reference that, but then here's the Excel sheet so that you can take and put it together how your brain works, because our brains all process the information differently. I struggle with non-numerical data because that's just how my brain ends up working, and I have to condition myself sometimes to get in the creative space, go into the right brain, and start to, you know, you guys know the manifestation world. So, um, that's probably where I need to work more, and somebody else might be there better, and I need to teach them and show them more of the left brain stuff.
I'd actually never heard that tip on the sending the Excel with the PDF. The PDF is obviously locked. And then for them to be like, hey, look, if you want to play around with the numbers, here is an open Excel spreadsheet. You can go ahead and do whatever you need to do. Yeah, man. And I love the overall idea, because I think a lot of people don't realize, especially on smaller loans, sometime at a local bank, you may be one signature away. So meaning that, like, a lot of smaller banks, if you're in the like 500 to $2-3 million, the person that you're talking to may have signature rights on its own. So you just have to convince him. And so it really goes back to that old relationship based business, which is so typical back at home where I'm from. And it's how banks used to be, which is obviously a lot harder for you to do at Wells Fargo or like Bank of America, because they don't work like that, but in a smaller bank. So I want to be mindful of your time. And I love this question, and I love it for you, especially because you have such a busy life. Is how do you guys cultivate balance, or what does balance look like for you guys as you have 2 kids, multiple businesses, properties across multiple states? I know you on a personal level, and I know that you're super into learning and growing and just a student of life in a lot of areas. So how do you cultivate balance? Or what is balance?
It's counterbalance. So
Counterbalance.
I a ballerina, they look like they're flowing across the stage, but meanwhile, they're bouncing left to right as fast as they can, just happen to be, doing it so trained that it looks like it's flowing, which is from Gary Keller's The One Thing book. It's an excerpt from there. So it's staying humble. It's understanding that no matter how busy or how hard you work, there will still be remaining tasks. And so just relishing in the wins, keeping compelling future in front of you, and figuring out how to make the work part of the lifestyle, as opposed to the, accommodating your life for the work.
I love that.
Well, Brad, I really appreciate you for coming on here, man. Enjoyed our convo. Thought we got some good tips, especially for how to secure loans, especially for a lot of first time folks. They may not realize that you can go and negotiate and push back and, make your case to the bank of, here's why this deal makes sense. Here's what I'm asking for. Here's why. And, pitch it just like you would pitch an investor. Right. So really appreciate that. Before we get into the last question, where can folks learn more about you and see all the good stuff that you have going on?
It's all the socials. So Facebook's probably the easiest and the most trafficked place that I spend my time. So that's Brad600 is that little URL after Facebook.com, BradandJamieFlanagan.com. And yeah, hopefully I'll give you some links or something along those lines, and
we'll get them in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah, that's the encouraging part, is like I started with zero negative, and yeah, seasoned investors, we already know to like lean into the network. It's one of the most gracious networks I've ever been a part of. Everybody wants to help, so definitely want to encourage those early stage investors and give them the hope that this is definitely possible. Just got to find the right people.
Love it, man.
And I'm honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. So the last question that we ask all of our guests is, what is your number one secret to success with real estate? We'll make it a little more broad for you.
Number one secret to success in real estate. So I didn't realize it. And I kind of, I like to mark the milestone. So I even have emails from my first position in 2005. And I would say I lead with love. Whereas a typical service provider will be frustrated with maybe the reaction that you get from a client over X, Y, and Z. I just remind myself that it's because of a lack of understanding. It's because of a lack of education. And I shouldn't ever take it for granted that all the knowledge that I've had, I actually sometimes say, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but I've forgotten more than some people know. And if I remind myself of that, I can put myself back to the place where I didn't know and somebody was willing to take the time and invest it in me. And so even if I personally don't have a loan program for it, I'm at least willing to absorb the information and find a connection, a referral, find a way for that person to help get that much closer to their goal.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you for coming on.
Amazing.
Really appreciate it. And for listeners out there, we'll make sure the links to Brad and Jamie are down below. Hope you guys have an amazing week. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye, guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Hey, STR Nation, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. And in the comments, let us know what topics you want us to cover on upcoming episodes, and we'll make sure to get that in the books for you. And if you really want to learn how to launch, automate, and scale your short-term rental business, if you want to go deeper, then check out our free masterclass at strsecrets.com.